Uncle Ron and Stuff, episode 13, and it's 2:20 a.m. I went to bed and I woke up and couldn't go back to sleep, so I got up. So I'm out here in my trusty old garage. I'm gonna try to set up a better location for these things. Anyway, uh, stuff. Been watching. There was a really good HBO series called Chernobyl, and it told the story pretty accurately of what happened in 1986 at the uh, Chernobyl nuclear reactor. There's four of them there, and this was number four that exploded. And it was Chernobyl is actually located in what's called Ukraine now. Anyway, it was of interest to me because I'm interested in particle physics. If I'm interested in cosmology, I'm also interested in particle physics. And particle physics, what what's down there, what makes up atoms and so on, it sort of the basis of just about anything you want to explore in the scientific world. Uh, as a side note, there was an old guy who used to live up the street, and he knew a lot about house moving. He'd been a house mover. I had a lot of respect for him. He only went to like the seventh grade or something, and yet he knew how to jack up a house and move it uh, miles sometimes. But in conversation with him, I realized he did not know where uh, various, I want to call them elements, uh, came from, and which made me remember that I was in high school. One of the things we had to do, or taking high school physics, was to memorize the periodic table and know the chemical symbols, I guess, and names of all of the known elements on Earth at the time, like iron and I don't know, lead, uh, various gases, helium, and so on and so on. And but at the time, it didn't explain. No one ever told me, you know, uh, that underneath of what I was memorizing, there was a whole world that that uh, uh, was to be explored about how those elements came about. And uh, you may or may not know that when the universe was formed, it was primarily hydrogen atoms came out when it cooled enough after the Big Bang. You had a lot of hydrogen, which is the simplest sort of what we consider an element. Um, one one nucleus and one electron spinning around it. Uh, but in the sun, gravity pulled in all this hydrogen material and compressed it so much that the splitting of things and free electrons and so on, that they started hitting molecules of other hydrogen atoms, and they started fusing things together, and so heavier atoms than hydrogen, helium, and lithium started being created inside of suns. Okay, and it goes so far, and stars eventually, if you will, use up all the hydrogen fuel, and they do what's called a supernova. They explode, and they puke out, or everything that was inside there gets thrown out into the universe in a big dusty mess. And then it sort of repeats if the environments are right. It everything gets pulled back in, and including lots more hydrogen, as well as some of the heavier elements that have got created in the supernova star. And this time, the fusion results in even heavier elements that, once again, a supernova spits those out into the universe, and this repeats. And for all the elements on Earth, I have read that it would have taken 7 exploding stars at least in our local neighborhood to give us the kind of dusty material that formed into the Earth. Gold, for instance. Gold is one of the heavier elements, and so it had to have been built up over time through multiple uh, uh, fusion reactions in multiple stars. And that's where gold came from. All material of anything other than hydrogen, helium, and some lithium all came out of the center of stars that exploded and was its material ejected into space and compacted. Anyway, the whole thing with nuclear particles, nuclear physics particles. I was watching what I consider one of the best docudramas about the Chernobyl accident in 1986, where reactor number 4 in Ukraine exploded and made a terrible, worst nuclear accident ever for its radiation spreading and so on. Anyway, during that docudrama, there's effort, scientists trying to figure out the reactors they were using at the time. It shouldn't have really exploded, but circumstances led up to it happening. And one of the main reasons it did explode was that there was they called it an error, a design flaw, and the control rods that were used to either heat up or the nuclear core or cool it down. Okay, and when things got bad in that particular situation at reactor 4, they tried to use control rods all at one time to completely shut down the reactor, but the control rod ends had graphite on it, which made the reactivity go up, which caused the reactor to get really hot. It boiled away all the steam, and the steam then is what actually exploded and blew the top off the reactor. But anyway, the flaw was known about in the Soviet Union, and it was the Soviet Union at the time, but it was kept a secret. Uh, People did know about it, but it was going to be too expensive to redesign and change all their. And at that time, the media was totally controlled by the Soviet Union. And so none of this was ever known to anybody, including those people running the reactors. They thought if they pushed a button, all the control rods would go down into this atomic nuclear reactor and shut it down completely, when in fact what happened, given the situation that it was in, it did cause a giant steam pressure explosion and subsequent fire. Okay, part of what was going on in the Soviet Union time was they wanted to keep things secret, even scientific facts. And so they were also really good at propaganda at the time. I remember them taking claim for the invention of the radio or the telegraph, or they did the first combustion engine. They were always claiming stuff like that, boasting up what great country they were and so on. Anyway, that led me to what I want to talk about today, which is propaganda. And the best example I can give you is this last week on the network television NBC. Over 2 days, 3 days, they had articles about uh, uh, the whole green idea, getting off fossil fuels. First one was about electric cars and how people experiences and buying them, and it showed this happy couple, and they were really happy with their electric car. They'd been wanting it. Now there was a government subsidy of the car, and they didn't have to put gas in the car. And oh, it was just great. Electric cars are great. You need to go buy, turn in your junker, and get an electric car. And propaganda, because electric cars are not ready for prime time. The batteries only last so long. It doesn't really work all that well in very cold weather, and the battery replacements are expensive, and uh, the electricity used to charge it still come from coal-fired plants. I don't know of any new nuclear plant being built in the United States, and you could try to cover every square inch of the United States in solar panels, and it wouldn't be enough to supply the power needs of the United States. You could put wind turbines all everywhere, and that would help a lot, but it wouldn't still meet the need of everybody having an electric car and heating their home and so on. And the grid itself could not handle if everybody went to an electric car. So it's sort of a propaganda thing. The truth is not being divulged completely there. And then they had a second article about nuclear fusion. Scientists have been working for years to try to replicate the process that occurs inside the sun, because fusion gives off more energy than fission. And it's cleaner because you don't have all these nasty radioactive byproducts that are now used. Nuclear rods used in reactors are setting in the bottom of pools in all of the reactors around the United States, because we still haven't come up with a depository for those things. And they stay radioactive for 10, 20, 100,000 years. I don't know, whatever it is. That's a real problem. It was one that was known about, but hey, nuclear power is cleaner than fossil fuels. So anyway, there was a whole article about how scientists going to be an announcement this week that America, of course, had broken through a new barrier, having related with nuclear fusion using lasers. And I think what I read was, for the very first time, they were getting more energy out of the fusion reaction than that was required to generate it. Now, that's always been a problem. Work on fusion reactors has been going on for 30 years at least. And every 5 or 6, 10 years, they come out and say, hey, we're almost there. We're almost there. Only a little bit more. Only a little bit more. I need another 6, 10, $15 billion, and I'll have it. So this latest announcement touted like, oh man, things are going to be so good in the future because we're going to have unlimited, literally free electrical power, because the material for a fusion reactor is hardly nothing. And okay, so they managed to sustain and get more energy out of the fusion reaction than it took to start it. Now, they didn't tell you how long that lasted, and it probably lasted in terms of nanoseconds or milliseconds, maybe. I doubt it, but maybe nanoseconds. And it's a very long way from sustaining a fusion reaction to one that you could sort of control and get enough heat out of to spin those turbines, and that's how it will work. Spin the steam turbines to generate electricity. But once again, it fits the agenda and narrative that the government wants, and that is that we need to get off fossil fuels, and here it is, we've got the solution. Now, they did say in passing that, okay, we've solved the science, now it's only an engineering problem. Engineering problem. It's been an engineering problem for 20 years. It'll be an engineering problem for another 25 years. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying it's not now. So the government is doing the same thing that the Soviets did during the Chernobyl incident and before, and they continue to do it. All governments do it. They use propaganda. They have a particular narrative they want to spread, and they have access to the media, which willingly do it. And the media people are not the sharpest knives in the drawer. They sort of, they parrot whatever they're told because they don't have the wherewithal to be able to look into it and determine, hey, wait a minute, where's all this electricity gonna come from to charge up all of these electric cars? And the grid can't support it. In fact, if everybody on the street I lived bought an electric car tomorrow, the power uh, cables coming down my street probably could not support the additional load of all those cars. So the last mile would have to be ripped up and replaced with heavier cables, and a lot of houses would not be able to support the additional load of a car, so they would have to be retrofitted with another electrical panel and maybe a new feed-in line. So propaganda. We get propaganda all the time, and that's what the Soviets did. They kept the secrets of their fatal flaw in their control rods. They didn't want anybody to know that. In America, we propaganda all the time, and I think it's important. The whole point of this long one is you got to be aware of propaganda, and we get propaganda hits all the time about a particular narrative. In this case, it's this whole green thing. I think Biden, he would really like a legacy that, well, he was the one who got us going on the right path for getting rid of fossil fuels and fixing the climate, helping fix the climate change problem. And I'm not saying the climate change problem is not a problem. I'm just saying that this, maybe you do have to fool enough people to get them to budge in the right direction. And talking about electric cars now when they're really not ready for prime time, or fusion reactors, they're not ready for prime time either. But it sounds good and news item, and we're headed in the right direction. We really are. But it's about propaganda. And again, that Chernobyl um, miniseries is really excellent, even if you're not interested in nuclear physics and how nuclear reactors work. The whole dynamics of that, of how they dealt with the problem and the people involved, and how the government reacted to it. I have to give credit for Gorbachev at the time, who was the premier, that he did what was necessary to get control of the problem. And even though many lives were lost, and I don't know the count, the radiation spread over such a wide area that there was lots and lots of subsequent deaths and cancers. But the Soviets did make a supreme effort to control that situation, and I have to give them credit for that. But they also kept a lot of it secret and classified it secret because it made them look bad. And in America, we have the same thing. We don't want to look bad to the rest of the world. We want to look like we're the leaders of everything. We're the democracy shining bright light for everything, and that we've not been any more successful in exporting democracy than the Soviets were, or even the Chinese, in exporting communism. It doesn't like to be exported. It doesn't work very well. We were going to bring democracy into Iraq, and Afghanistan. We were going to do that. And we did. We set up a democratic government in Afghanistan and Iraq, and now it's all crumbled down and back the way it was before we entered. Anyway, propaganda, and I don't know how you start. You have to listen, and I guess you have to know enough to discern that what you're hearing is in fact propaganda. And I don't know how to tell you how to do that other than to question things. Question it, research it, dig into it. I know you don't want to do that. It's too much work. That's what everybody says. Well, I don't want it. And they believe the government. And the government wants you to believe that they are the trustworthy source of everything they say. You got to heaven forbid the American people would lose confidence in their government. That could lead to chaos and revolution and I don't know, all kind of things. And they don't want to do that, so they're real, just like the Soviets were and the Chinese are now. They want to make sure they keep their people fat, dumb, and happy. And that's all that's important because unhappy people can be a problem. Look at North Korea. That's a lot of terrible situations down. If you're not a party official, you're in deep kimchi up there. It's a real struggle to stay alive, but according to all of the North Korean media and anything they put out, they're just great. They have some problems. They'll admit they have some problems, but they're working on them. And the next 5-year program will solve them all. Propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. Every country does it, but you need to be able to discern what is and what isn't propaganda. And it's coming at us all the time. Uh, I don't know. This is a late night bullet, and it's gone on way longer than any of the other ones I've ever done. But if you haven't seen the Chernobyl HBO series, it is really excellent. It is done so well. I can't find fault in any of it. The actors, the cinematography, the special effects, the explanations, the plain talk about all of it. It's just really really excellent, and I encourage you to try to find a copy of it, or if you don't have HBO, it's probably out on a disc. But anyway, and keep an eye as you watch it for the elements of propaganda that were there at the time and how the KGB, which is still around, was a big factor in what happened there. And as the one scientist says, the real cause of the explosion, that reactor number 4 in Chernobyl, was lies. Uh, the information about the defect in their reactor was kept a secret from everybody. Even the people running the plants didn't know that. Because they had the belief that the scram button would immediately shut down the reactor, and which will lead me another whole talk about beliefs, what we believe in, which is real important. That's enough for this late night. Now it's quarter to 3 a.m. It's 3 a.m. Late night extended version of Uncle Ron and Stuff. I think this is episode 13, but I don't know. I get it wrong, but I'll label it correctly on the YouTube channel. And that's it for night. It's the 14th of December, and Christmas is coming, and I got stuff to do, so I might disappear for a while. Besides, there's nobody listening to these things anyway. Good night, and I'm going to take a pill and try to go back to sleep.